Okay, so your latest report shows, I think, it's an 88% increase in hardware vulnerabilities and a doubling of network vulnerabilities. Uh, are there any particular things that are driving this surge, and why might these foundational layers, as we might call them, become more attractive targets again?
I'm happy to jump in here, David. I think what we're seeing across our customer base is that the rise in desire to have hardware in particular tested by ethical security researchers is growing. As a result of that, of course, you're going to then find more vulnerabilities. I think as we see our customers and their changing attack surface, they're realizing that they've spent a good amount of time up until this point really hardening or trying to harden the application layer. So as they've spent time with in development, code review, and testing, they've done a lot of that before the product is launched or their platform is launched in some cases. And then what they're realizing is by the time this is in production, there's other parts of the attack surface that have been somewhat ignored throughout that development process. So what we're seeing is more customers coming to us saying, "Hey, how do I start to do testing from a physical device or hardware perspective?" And we're able to help highlight some of the great talent that we have in the research community around hardware testing. And the same thing's going on the network testing side. David, anything that you're seeing out there as well?
No, I think you said it great. I mean, people are getting more and more concerned about their entire platform and their entire supply chain and making sure all of it is secure and focusing less on just here's an application and trying to look at the whole big picture. This is what makes the business run.
Yeah, and I guess we can't ignore the fact that AI is the sort of, oh, I won't call it the elephant in the room because we're not ignoring it, but AI, it's expanding the attack surface at, I guess, an unprecedented rate. Any sort of insights you can give us as to how attackers are using AI to accelerate both discovery and then exploitation of vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think from I'll give kind of just a super high level view, and then David jump in for the specifics here, please. I think from our perspective, we look at it at AI as a tool, a target, and a threat. So what does that mean in terms of security researchers? Well, security researchers are now able to do testing at scale, the same way that a bad actor can do testing at scale, right? It's improved the efficiency and productivity, the same way that we would see it across development or other pieces of the business. You now have threat actors and in turn defenders that are able to leverage AI to improve their own efficiency and their own scale. When we think about it from a target perspective, it is considerably increasing the attack surface that our customers are facing. Every one of these new AI first tools that they're putting into their environment is inherently potentially increasing the attack surface of their business. It's another tool in their supply chain that they have to think about from a security and safety perspective. And then the last piece around how is this kind of changing the market, we're seeing the barrier to entry both to be a good faith security researcher and to be a bad actor as being lessened, right? We're seeing that less sophisticated attackers are able to use AI to do much more sophisticated attacks. And we're seeing that it's narrowing in difference or sophistication level between what you would see as a criminal bad actor and what you would see as a nation state attack. And a large part of that is driven by the rise of the use of AI within hacking, both on the ethical security researcher side as well as on the bad actor side. Sorry, David, I jumped in there. Do you want to add to that?
no, I think that you hit it exactly right. It's making people more efficient. It's making it easier for someone with little skill to have a higher skill level. And so that, of course, increases the threat. And I think one thing that I want to emphasize here on the bottom line is the difference between AI and orchestration and how attackers are using it is they're using it to more quickly adapt. Like if you went and you built an orchestration tool to help you go hack something, it's very rigid. And what we're seeing attackers doing is using the AI to say, okay, go first, look at this site, and then create a plan of what you think the right next actions to be, and then execute that plan. And so that's one of the things that's changing here.
Okay, and other things, I mean, the report has a lot of information in there, but I think another highlight I spotted was the 10% rise in API vulnerabilities alongside significant increases in access control failures and sensitive data exposure. So, if it's possible to, which of these trends do you think should CISOs be prioritizing? And if you can choose one of those, what would be the reason to prioritize one of them?
Dave, what do you think? I think I would choose API because APIs are how business transactions are done. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think this aligns that aligns perfectly with what we're seeing for customer demand. Customers and CISOs in particular are incredibly concerned about securing their supply chain. No longer is your security posture dictated by your state. Everything that you're integrated with, every vendor supplier that you're doing business with, as David talked about, to do these transactions, that now inherently increases the potential attack surface. And we've seen this recently playing out with the third party security incidents, whether it be drift in sales law or one of the many others. We're seeing that organizations are exposed by the security postures of their supply chain, and it's something that customers are really paying attention to. I mean, this was what drove the rise in SBOM and software composition analysis to understand the third party components going into your code. And now we're seeing this changing in real time from a company's both physical and virtual supply chain as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then back to AI, I guess applications. I think everyone knows that they're cycling through development faster than ever. I know see things almost daily about vibe coding and the dangers of that, for example. But how is velocity affecting security quality, and are there any particular safeguards that can be put in place? Because obviously it's very attractive to speed up the development, but if that comes with compromised security, how do you balance those two, I suppose?
Well, I think anywhere you put in AI, the answer is going to be the same, which is you need human validation at the end. I mean, you can have people vibe code, and that's not necessarily the danger. It's when they stop paying attention to the results and slowly things just go off a cliff, right? It's like watching the Titanic sink. And that's true in security when you're using AI tools for pen testing. You need that human in the loop to make sure that it's doing the right thing, as well as for coding, right? When you're coding, you need to be asking the AI, can you go validate the findings? And then you also have to make sure the AI isn't lying. And a lot of the tests that we're doing, we're finding up to 40% of the time when AI says it confidently has done something, it's confidently incorrect.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction here too. There's a growing sentiment in the market that vibe coding is bad, or it's going to be inherently less secure than human coding. We haven't seen that, right? So in all of the data that we have, whether it's our own internal testing against code that we're writing by leveraging uh, various AI assistant tools for our developers, or what we're seeing in our customer portfolios, code is not getting inherently less secure. If anything, these model companies are investing significantly to make sure that their models are writing not just great functional code, but strong, secure code as well. So I think to David's point, he's exactly right that we're seeing oftentimes you have perhaps more junior developers that are using this as a crutch, and they're using this as a way to write code really quickly, and they're focused on the quantity of how much code they're putting out versus the quality of code. Unfortunately, that happens whether it's a human writing all the code or whether they're leveraging an AI coding assistant. So I think the important piece here comes back to the validation, understanding the architecture of the application, understanding the integration points across the supply chain, and then ultimately doing a level of validation and security testing against whatever that code base is to give you a sense of at least a baseline level of security before you head into a production or even a pre-prod environment.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And another finding, critical vulnerability payouts risen by just over 30%.
Yeah.
What, if anything, I guess, does it tell us about the value organizations placing on ethical hackers' role of crowdsourced security even?
Yeah, I think very simply, customers acknowledge the value of the human security researcher more than ever. So with this rise of agentic testing and autonomous testing, there was a trepidation amongst the hacker community that they were going to be replaced by AI. This couldn't be further from the truth, right? The goal of all of these autonomous tools should be to make that human researcher superhuman. And what we're seeing on the customer side is the value that they're placing in the results that they're seeing from security testing by human agents is significantly higher than how they value autonomous testing. While we're calling it AI testing today, autonomous testing has been around for a long time, right? We called them scanners, right? There's been automation and scanners running against networks and infrastructure and applications for decades. And what we're seeing today is that the code is still insecure. We haven't solved the security problem in the industry. Humans are one component of that. Automation is another component. And our view is that by combining those two, it gives you the scale and the speed that you get from automation with the human validation and the human touch to find those really critical novel vulnerabilities. And that's an important distinction here on humans being able to find novel, never before seen vulnerabilities versus traditional scanners and the like will find something after it's already been identified by a human.
Okay, and Bugcrowd as an organization, you emphasize the need for collective resilience, I think is the phrase. And in practical terms, and I'm sure you've been asked this many times over the years, but how can CISOs break out of these siloed security approaches and leverage community-driven intelligence? I mean, silos, as we know, exist all over the enterprise, and I think people are still perhaps wrestling with how to break them down. But in this particular case, what advice would you give?
I think very simply share with your peers. So what we're seeing the best CISOs are doing today is they view security as a shared responsibility, whether it's across an ecosystem, an industry or sector, or across their own supply chain. So they're sharing best practices, they're sharing attacks that they're seeing, they're looking for ways to get more involved in the community so that they have a preemptive look at what's coming around the corner. The analogy I like to use is a phalanx, right? One person may get hit by the arrow, and immediately that phalanx tightens, and everybody else gets stronger and more secure as a result. So while you never want to be the person that sees an attack first or has a security incident first, by communicating effectively with your peers across industry, whether that's government, whether that's private sector, you have the ability now to start to preempt. And that's really the value here is preempting some of those security vulnerabilities and starting to drive far more visibility and transparency and ultimately getting to that shared responsibility piece across the industry. David, anything else you would add there?
I think that sharing is very important. I think the other thing I see high performance CISOs doing is really looking at security is paving roads for quality. So I'll give you an example of this bottom line. I had a friend of mine was the head for product security for Cloudflare, and their entire ethos on this was, a security incident that's going to create downtime. That's actually a quality problem. And when you view it that way, I think it opens up a lot more doors because you're not saying no, you're asking, how do we make things better? And the other thing that I see in common is people are looking at security as paving roads to do secure things, not saying no, but paving roads.
Okay, and the report it features insights from leaders at the NFL and I think Monash University when it comes to governing AI and managing complex ecosystems. What are the biggest governance challenges CISOs are facing with AI right now? I guess that we could probably have a separate conversation on that, but if you can
Yeah.
kind of consolidate the answer.
David, you want to go first on that one?
I think there's two challenges. So first, there's the question of technically what can it do? And then also how do I staff to make sure that we're checking the results, we're building the right process and people behind the technology. So I think that's one set of challenges. The other is just the barrage of new legal issues that come up. It's security has a lot of benefits where we're looking at how to improve, quality and security. But when you look at like AI coding, there's still big questions about like how do you use these models appropriately, not to introduce risk, and how do you even tag what was AI produced in case someone asks a question later on. And I got to admit, that surprised me as well. And it almost bites you at the worst possible moment. You're going to make a big deal, you're going to have a big connection. And then all of a sudden, all these questions come up about what is the provenance of how you're using AI and being able to answer that question.
Yeah, I think the other piece I'd add there too is really around what data are your employees putting into an AI
Mhm.
model, right? So what is the governance and policy and the accompanying training that goes with that around how are your team members utilizing AI, right? So not just from a, hey, what is the AI introduced code into my environment do from a legal issue, but actually the flip side of that as well is any of my proprietary IP going into an AI model? Are we sharing very simple examples, right? Somebody wants to write a memo to the company and they take a bunch of company data, put it into an LLM to help generate what that memo should be. Well, you now have to understand that some of that information is now into the model, right? So I think that's where from a GRC and a risk perspective alongside the CISO, it's a combination of, hey, how do we, to David's earlier point, how do we pave the road for the business to move faster and to be more effective and to be more productive? In the same vein, how do we balance the inherent risk that comes as a result of this, whether it be from a legal challenge or potentially losing customer data as a result of that?
Okay, and I realize I could possibly have ordered the questions a little bit better because I'm going back to network vulnerabilities here, which I think we mentioned early doors. So they're doubling, and I'm just intrigued as to whether you think that is an indication that basic security hygiene, there's a problem with that, or is it just there's more and more digital infrastructure out there, more and more data, and therefore it was always going to increase just because, the digital world is expanding.
I mean, I think if we look back, we're feeling the results somewhat of the race to digital transformation in the 2020 to 2022 timeframe, right? Where organizations that were not ready to go fully remote or fully digital were putting everything up, whether it be cloud hosted or self-hosted, in an effort to make their employees able to do their jobs in a remote fashion. So I think a piece of this is we're seeing some of the cleanup effort of that. We still encourage customers to get back to the security basics and fundamentals. So you still see whether it's SQL injection or cross-site scripting, some of these very common vulnerabilities that are on the OWASP top 10 every single year are on the OWASP top 10 for a reason because we continue to find them year in and year out, even with the capability to detect. So I think you're seeing a combination of getting back to the fundamentals and focusing on gaps and weaknesses in areas that haven't been tested as well historically, and also feeling some of the effects of kind of that race to put everything into the cloud.
Okay, and then when it comes to access control, which again I know was mentioned at the top of the conversation, so broken access controls become number one critical vulnerability category. Again, I guess the question is why are organizations still struggling with what's a fairly fundamental issue? And is it again just because there's more and more users with more and more devices in more and more locations, so you're inevitably going to get more issues, or is something else going on?
I think that one of the things that you're seeing out there is how we're connecting everything together is made just dealing with simple authentication and authorization really difficult and really distributed. And people are struggling with that. And there's also, to your previous question, a blurred line between what's internal and external. And so you see people accidentally exposing internal APIs through external systems, things of that nature. I think the other thing is we are seeing, the third thing is we're seeing this increase in AI, and some of these challenges, like are you authenticated, are you authorized to view something, are kind of the hardest for AI because you have to have business sense about what's appropriate and what's not. Dave, what do you think?
I think you summarized it well there. I think the contextual need to know basis is incredibly hard to automate, and that really is where you need that level of human validation.
And in terms of at board level, better understanding and supporting the shift from reactive firefighting? Again, this is probably a conversation you've had numerous times over the years. It's never seemed to go away as a topic, depressingly. But how can folks shift from reactive firefighting to more proactive, offensive security-based resilience? What are there some easy steps, or is it a fairly complicated infrastructure that needs to be built out?
David, you want to take that one?
Uh, it's a funny question. So when people are going from reactive to proactive, a lot of this is as your maturity level in cybersecurity increases, you start just naturally evolving to this. It's not that emergencies don't happen. We just had React to Shell, where I personally was patching servers over the weekend to make sure that they were just research ones, but those weren't vulnerable. So you are going to have those things that you have to do quickly, and you have to have that process. The second part of it is prioritizing things that may be a vulnerability, but don't need to be fixed right away. That doesn't mean you don't fix them. You drop them in as normal engineering processes and starting to figure out how does security intertwine with engineering. And I'll give you an example. If Google Chrome, widely used by billions, they find a new vulnerability, they don't drop everything, get out a patch to the billions of devices. They have a whole process where they look at it and say, is it being actively exploited? No. Well, then it'll be part of our next release. And that starts slowing things down and making a more sustainable life cycle because people just get burned out if everything's an emergency.
And your report discusses the difficulty that the CISOs have in translating risk to the board. Are there any particular sort of evidence-based frameworks or metrics that can help them communicate, levels of risk to the folks that are maybe going to make the ultimate decision?
I think this has been a challenge that CISOs have faced forever and likely are going to face forever in terms of how do you articulate risk before an incident, right? Oftentimes, security is viewed as the insurance policy, right? You want it when you need it, but you don't really understand the value of it up until that point of need. I think what we are seeing across industry is a requirement from regulatory bodies to have security expertise on the board. So we've seen that with the SEC out of the US, where they're requiring that certainly public companies have security expertise on the board. And I think you're seeing the effects of that trickle into privately held organizations as well. Having somebody that understands how cyber works, understands the investment that's required, understands how to validate risk and make risk-based decisions. You're never going to be entirely secure or entirely unable to be the victim of a security incident. So it's about balancing the risk to investment based on the likelihood of an attack being successful. I think for security officers, it's increasingly more important to not cry wolf. This goes to David's point where everything's a fire drill, everything's an emergency, and being able to articulate risk without being hyperbolic, without being overly dramatic in terms of what the potential outcome would be, and sticking to the facts of this is what we know so far, this is the process that we have and the methodology that we'll follow to validate this. And then if we do understand or believe to understand that there was some sort of an incursion into the estate, then we look at, okay, what's our incident response plan and how do we go validate what that looks like, contain it as quickly as possible, and then do some of the forensic work. So I think that's really where the best chief security officers are going. And it's about what is my time to detect? So how quickly can I identify that there was a potential risk? What's my time to containment and understanding, okay, how do I prevent this, right? So kind of time to detect, time to stop whatever the incident is, whether that's shutting down user access, shutting down server access, shutting down application or supply chain access. And then finally, how do I contain this and all the investigation workflow that goes as a result of that? And those numbers and those best practices will change based on the size and the complexity of the organization and certainly the scale of a potential attack. But you're looking for something to be able to contain within hours, not days. And you want to be able to understand what is the impact to my organization and how do you then articulate what the gaps were and what the risk was. And I think it's important that I'm a strong believer that CISOs report directly to the CEO, that it doesn't sit under a technology function for one very specific reason, that if we're going to start to hold security officers liable for security incidents, then you need to start holding CEOs responsible as well, because I think it's a critical partnership to make sure that the right level of investment, the right support from a board perspective is in place to be able to make those organizations successful.
And I'm also wondering, just cyber resilience. Do you think there's enough attention paid, as I think you alluded to the recovery? I mean, I'm thinking in the UK at least, we've had some high-profile names being put,
Right.
whether it's Marks and Spencer's website or Jaguar's production, put
Mhm.
out of action for months, which to the uninitiated sounds somewhat surprising that they were not able to get up and running faster. I don't want to put words in. I mean, is it possible that you can be that unlucky, a combination of circumstances that you can't control can be that impactful on your business, or is it likely that some, I'm not necessarily talking about them, but if some catastrophic incident like that occurs, is it likely that something was overlooked at some stage, shall we say?
I think there's still a lot we don't know about those particular attacks, right? I think there's things that certainly they'll know internally that we won't know from a public or external perspective. I think this comes back to what David said, which is security needs to be looked at as a function of software quality and application quality and infrastructure quality and the network and hardware, right? And all the things that we've talked about. So I think as we look at the industry and look at how we think about these, it's about, again, getting back to basics, understanding the fundamentals of your architecture, understanding the fundamentals of your supply chain, securing the weak links as quickly as possible, and making sure that to your point, that there is a level of resiliency that exists both from a security perspective alongside the traditional uh, kind of IT resiliency that you would expect to see, right? Servers go down, hardware breaks, things fail. So how do you have resiliency for that? You need to make sure you're matching that on the cyber side. David, anything you would add there?
I think that you put it well, especially that every industry is going to be slightly different. I just got back from Japan where this all became very real, where people couldn't buy their favorite beer for a month. So cyber resiliency, when you have physical manufacturing, is just way different than if you just have to have resiliency for your software as a service. And so every case is going to be a bit different.
Fair enough. Back to AI one more time. So I think we've already identified that it's a tool for defenders, but also for the attackers. And I think you had insights from an expert hacker in the report. Was there anything particular that surprised you when it comes to AI's role in modern exploitation? I mean, for me, whether it's covered in the report or not, it's this fact that it's giving sort of the uneducated some powerful tools to do things which they just wouldn't have been able to figure. But what was what did the hacker reveal that you either surprised you or just confirmed what you thought in terms of AI's potential downside, shall we say?
So I think AI has been surprising to me. It's been much more successful than I would have thought it would been at some areas. And a lot of that comes down to being able to effectively create prompts and prompt engineering, some very technical reasons. But just if you pop up a level, the bottom line is this. The AI knows how to use a variety of tools and knows how to use them well. And I guess I didn't really appreciate how well it could choose the right tool for the job until I saw that. This isn't replacing human creativity. This is more just about they're more experienced than I would have guessed, given how young they are.
Okay, and on the other side, I suppose, of AI, it clearly can be a force for good. Is there a way of strengthening AI models so that they're trained to spot potential trouble? I mean, I'm thinking reinforcement learning, for example. Is that the
Hmm.
answer, or what else?
This is an area that we've been investing in. So one of the things that we're excited, Dave and I, that we're working on together is we build reinforcement learning environments and sell them to foundational models where they're representative, they're real life, and they allow AI to practice. Like one of the changes people may not realize happened is early days of AI was about just ingesting all the data and it was kind of memorizing that data. And now you have to train the AI. And so there's going to be a set of foundational teams doing that. And we're very excited to provide those foundational models reinforcement learning environments. And then on top of that, that's like making a smarter brain. Then you have to build the body around that to take your particular situation and do the right thing. And that's the agentic approach. And so you really need both, right? Like there's the foundational models that are using reinforcement learning and the people fine tuning. And there's still going to be a place for agents that are specific to your circumstance, and bring that AI flavor to what you do.
Okay, and you've been very patient with me. We're nearly there, so thank you. As I said at the start, we got a lot to cover. Just a couple more things. We've already, I think, agreed, or you certainly stated that taking humans out of the loop entirely is not a very, smart thing to do when it comes to security, leaving everything to AI. But in terms of that approach, just interested the sort of human-led AI-powered security. Is that what prompted you, with the Mayhem acquisition? Is that what was behind that?
The simple answer is absolutely, right? It was how do we blend the best of autonomous testing and the platform that David and the team had built at Mayhem with the power of the crowd? And how do we then combine all of the autonomous testing capability to help enable our customers to identify vulnerabilities earlier in the development cycle as quickly as possible, and at the same time enable the crowd to become far more effective with finding security vulnerabilities. So this was about kind of a two-pronged. As we think about our business, we have two customers. We have the customer that pays us, and we have the crowd customer. And in those regards, we wanted a solution that would empower both of those and help achieve both of those goals in our mind. And we felt, after looking at, I spent close to a year meeting with various organizations all across the world around AI security, and some of the whether it be the more established players or some of the upstart startups that are coming out, and ultimately kept coming back to David and the team at Mayhem as one, the best cultural fit for us as an organization, the best team fit, but most importantly, the best technological fit as well, and the capability that they had built.
Okay, and finally, and I realize now I should have asked you these separately, and then we could have compared your lists. But in terms of predictions for 2026, I won't say top five. I'm just important things you think that people need to, be on the lookout for over the next 12 months. I mean, whether it's just, reinforcing anything we've covered, or if there's anything else we might have missed. Just your thoughts as to any predictions. And I know in the world we live in now, predictions are probably even less sensible than they might have been once upon a time. But yeah, your best guesses, please.
Yeah, David, why don't you go first?
Uh, I only have a couple big predictions. So I think, about 24 months ago, we saw everyone said, I have to AI all these things. And then this last year, we've seen people kind of question what is the business value, and they were figuring that out. I think this coming year, the big theme and the big production is everyone's going to be asking, how do we trust that AI and that these tools are giving us answers that make sense? And so we have like, where can we use it? That was 2 years ago. Does it make sense? That was last year. And this is like, okay, is this data that we can take action on? Like it really makes sense. So I think that's the biggest prediction I have.
Yeah, I think maybe a more, for me, one of the more common sense predictions is really around the scale of the attacks that we're going to see, right? I think we will see, and we've already seen this in some regards, albeit somewhat unsuccessful, we will see a major attack played out with AI at the forefront of that. And it's going to be incumbent on the defenders to be able to, again, going back to the whole incident response and how do you think about security in this new age, is how quickly can we detect it as an industry? How quickly can we stop it and then contain any impact from it? And we've seen kind of the first version of this start to play out with a recent attack. But I think we're going to see something on an even larger scale here within the next 12 months. And ultimately, it's going to be a bad actor that is leveraging some combination of agentic AI piecemeal together to be able to run a wide scale, large volume attack.
Okay, thank you. And we've obviously I started in daylight and it's nearly dark here, so that's how long I've been. So apologies for that. But no, seriously, both David and Dave really appreciate the time you have given me. There's some fantastic insights into what is obviously a complicated and fast-moving part of the IT, and it combines, I guess, the two most sort of talked about topics, AI and cybersecurity. So really appreciate your time and the insights. Thank you both. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Philip. This is great.